Morning, everyone. You know, many of you were in attendance last Friday as leaders from both parties joined together to send a bipartisan jobs bill to the president's desk. It was a great example of what we can accomplish when we all listen to the American people. Another example came on Tuesday when we passed a bipartisan highway bill to prevent projects from shutting down here in the next several months. I expect a quick resolution of this matter in a bipartisan way. The House also passed bipartisan legislation to keep the Internet tax-free. The bill would benefit American families and small businesses and encourage greater economic growth. And I think it deserves an up or down vote in the United States Senate. And I don't have to remind you that we still have over 40 bipartisan bills that passed the House that will help our economy that continue to sit in the United States Senate. Working parents deserve or desperately need more flexibility in today's workplace. And we've passed legislation to help balance the demands of work and family. Middle-class families are struggling with higher energy prices. We've passed legislation to lower those costs. Small businesses are struggling under the weight of the president's mandates and regulations and red tape. And we've passed legislation to ease this burden. These are just a few of the examples of what Republicans are working on to foster more economic growth and more job creation in our country. For the nearly 4 years of our majority, Republicans have stayed focused on the economy and on jobs. We've listened to the American people, and their priorities are our priorities. Lastly, I'd like to address the situation in Israel, which is under attack. I'm glad the President telephoned the Prime Minister, but I think we must send a clear, unified, and public message. Israel is our friend, and Israel's enemies are our enemies. The Israelis recently intercepted Iranian-supplied weapons headed for Gaza. This is part of Iran's long history of providing rockets and rocket parts to Gaza-based terrorist organizations, as well as Hezbollah, which operates in Lebanon and in Syria. Those weapons were used to attack Israel. The Obama administration is pursuing nuclear negotiations with Iran, and there are some who believe that the administration should engage the Iranians to help deal with the situation in Iraq. In light of that, let me restate this. Israel is our friend, and Israel's enemies are our enemies. While it would be in Iran's best interest to have a weak or divided Iraq, it's not in the United States' best interest. Our interests are not aligned, and Republicans remain focused on pushing the White House to do more to counter Iran's support for terrorists and efforts to destabilize a key U.S. ally in the region.
All these different bills in the past 2 or 3 years here, these big spending imbroglios. As you work on this border bill here, regardless of what the cost might be, I know Hal Rogers is scrubbing this here. Do you anticipate this being one of those again, because there's going to be fights over offset? And I've heard from many folks that there's an effort to try to offset most or some of this. How does that help you get the votes?
Well, we're continuing to work with Mr. Rogers at the Appropriation Committee and our border working group. Conversations have gone on all week. No decisions have been made.
Speaker, go ahead. Speaker Boehner, there seems to be a huge gulf right now between Democrats and Republicans on how to handle this crisis. Do you have confidence that the two sides can come to some kind of agreement by the end of the month?
I would certainly hope so, but I don't have as much optimism as I'd like to have. But again, we're working with our border group. We're working with the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, trying to find some way to deal with what is a humanitarian crisis at our border, and it needs to be dealt with.
Mr. Speaker, Senator Cruz just last night gave an interview and said that he's going to demand that the DACA policy be stopped as a condition of this passing. And hasn't said how far he'll go. But as you know, a lot of your members listen to Ted Cruz. They're very closely aligned. This has caused issues for you in the past. How much harder does it make it for you to get votes for this bill when Senator Cruz is making a demand like
Well,
that?
we don't have a bill yet. We're having a lot of discussions, and we're going to continue those discussions.
I'm wondering on the topic of corporate inversions, do you think that the Congress ought to ban federal contracts for companies that shift their tax address overseas? And do you think that there should be something more done on that topic in the context of tax reform or otherwise?
Well, I do believe that it's kind of a sad situation that companies find themselves having to relocate their headquarters overseas. But one only has to look at a tax code that we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And while the president likes to talk about the fact that he's for fixing this problem, I've not seen a proposal out of the White House that would do that. Chairman Camp outlined a tax reform proposal earlier this year that dealt with this issue, I think, in a very responsible way. And the sooner that we have real tax reform on the corporate and personal level, the sooner that we'll see this issue come to an end.
Now, the contracts thing, though, has been attached to 4 appropriations bill. Is that something that you support? Would you like to see a contracts ban?
I'd take a look at it, but I don't know enough, don't really know enough about it. Yes, ma'am.
That you disagree with calls to impeach the president over abuse of power via executive actions. But under the Constitution, the House actually has the power of the purse. So if the president takes actions that exceed his constitutional authority, will you withhold funding for those actions in the next House pass appropriations bill?
Well, there's a lot of ways to deal with this issue. But we've got a Republican House and we've got a Democrat Senate. And there are a lot of things that we've passed here that the Senate clearly has not passed. And when it comes to that issue, some of these actions that you could defund, there clearly isn't, I wouldn't guess, an appetite in the United States Senate to withhold those funds. That's why we've decided that the more direct approach of suing the president is the right path to go down here. Listen, I'm for upholding the Constitution. I'm for protecting the interest of the House vis-a-vis the power grab that's going on by the White House. And while he has the authority to issue executive orders, he does not have the authority to unilaterally change laws in our country, which he has done.
The border crisis, you're self-proclaimed the most optimistic people around. Why is your optimism now fleeting regarding the border crisis? If you could expand on that, what specifically is the reason for that?
There have just been some comments made by our colleagues across the aisle that are going to make this much more difficult to deal with. But having said that, we're going to continue these conversations and try to come to some agreement.
Which comments do you submit to that? The changes to the 2008 law not being acceptable, those types of
Yeah,
comments?
something like that.
Just to follow up on that, that has become the flashpoint in this debate, and Leader Pelosi argued that it should be done separately. Is the only way to get the money that the president wants, will Republicans only tie it to that policy change?
Again, we're having these conversations, and I don't want to lock myself in, but I don't know how you can address the problem down there without looking at the 2008 law. I don't know how Congress can send more money to the border to begin to mitigate the problem if you don't do something about the 2008 law that's being abused, and it is being abused.
Do you support Hensarling's TRIA bill, the terrorism risk insurance bill?
I haven't really looked at all the details of it, but I know Mr. Hensarling's trying to find some way to get it passed, and he's the right guy to ask.
On the Highway Trust Fund, Republicans waived COTGO, which has been a relatively rare event, to pay for, to not increase. You guys didn't cut spending elsewhere to pay for the continued payment paid for Highway Trust Fund. People would argue that was not much of an emergency, which is ordinarily when you would try and waive COTGO or PAYGO. Why would you seek offsets for the supplemental, given the difference?
There were offsets provided in the highway bill. And it's a sound proposal. It's why it got bipartisan support in the House, and it's frankly why it's going to get bipartisan support in the Senate. And you know, to the extent that it's possible on the House side, we attempt to do that with this other money that's going to be spent.
Spending cuts. Speaker Pelosi said there was talk of non-discretionary, non-defense discretionary spending offsets being requested as a price for the supplemental money. Is that something that you're considering?
We are.
The border crisis is an appropriate place to revisit the 2012 DACA decision the president made, or would you prefer to have that separately discussed elsewhere?
We're discussing all of these issues with the border working group and the appropriators and have come to no decisions.
Last question.
Thanks, Speaker Boehner. Some have said that under the 2008 law, the administration has the authority under exceptional circumstances to make tweaks to that law. Would there be a problem, do you think, with the White House or the Homeland Security Secretary taking the action on himself and not having Congress?
That clearly is an option. I'm not familiar with how much authority they have under the 2008 law. I do know that they have the ability to take a number of steps now without Congress acting to begin to mitigate this problem, but they've not taken them. And I can't imagine our members are going to want to send more money down there without attempting to mitigate the problem at the border. Thanks.